This video is going to contain spoilers from the very beginning, so I'm warning you now. Smile 2 has just been released in cinemas, and that opening scene. Wow. I didn't expect one of the best and arguably most gory moments in the entirety of the 2-hour and 12-minute movie to arrive the moment I sat down in my seat. This opening scene was phenomenal for a number of different reasons. It established the tone and mood of the journey that we're about to embark on. It bridged the connection between the first movie and the second one perfectly. And it was one of the most tense, stylistic, exciting, and horrific moments that I've seen in a movie all year. With it being one of the most memorable moments in the feature, I thought I'd share why I felt the opening scene was one of the best moments in the film and why it was perfect. So let's get into it. Here is why Smile 2's opening scene is perfect. The decision to use a single take shot. The first thing that I felt was really effective in this opening scene was the fact that it was set out in a way that was a single take shot. It started with the camera outside of the car as we were looking at Joel sitting there, contemplating what it was that he was going to do and if he was going to go through with it. And then from that moment on, it continued to flow seamlessly until he was ultimately killed right at the end several minutes later. The decision to make the scene a single take really allowed the pacing of the several minutes to build with more of a natural rhythm and pacing, and for it to seem as if it were all taking place in real time. Whether that be the decision making that Joel made in committing to going up behind the brother with the gun and eventually killing him, right up until the entire feeling and tone of the scene changed where he noticed the gang members pulling up outside of the house as he tried to leave. This was after there was a newfound sense of optimism when he noticed Lewis and realized that he'd be rid of the smiling entity. It went from steady to completely chaotic, and that mood was able to be captured because it was shot in a free-flowing way and was constantly rolling from one part into the other. We got to feel as though we were inside of Joel's head and understand the emotions that he was going through, from killing the brother to then realizing it was all for nothing because they both died, to then feeling hopeful but filled with guilt because Lewis was there, to then being fearful again because of the gang, to then being free but eventually killed by the truck in the road when he ran in front of it. The free-flowing camera shot was the one and only constant amongst this chaos, and it kept the steady rhythm throughout the disruptive time. The fact that there were no cuts meant that moments such as Joel being stuck inside tiny corners of rooms and breaking down pieces of wood felt claustrophobic because there was nowhere for the camera to go. It wasn't going to cut away and give us a different angle, so the constant movement from left to right and not being able to go behind the character made it feel even more cramped, and it simply added to the tension that was building. I would also say that with the camera just slowly zooming out right at the end of the scene and revealing the blood that was spread across the road in the shape of a smile, it was a hauntingly perfect way for it to conclude. The red of the blood contrasted the backdrop of the scene, which was just white snow, and it stuck in the memory even more because of that. The bridging of both movies. One thing that this opening scene did really well was that it bridged the connection between the first installment and the second installment in a way that, as a viewer, we didn't really expect. For example, we knew of Joel from the first movie, and we knew that he'd take on the smiling entity due to the final scene of Smile 1 where he watched Rose burn herself under the control of the entity. So when this movie opened up, we saw that it was set 6 days later. With it putting a heavy focus on Joel right from the off, it kind of made out like he'd be more of an important figure, or at least have a larger amount of screen time in the movie than what he eventually went on to have. But that was exactly what the director wanted us to feel because of the way that the scene ended. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had that shock value when he was hit by a car. If we always thought that he was going to die, then it wouldn't have landed. Without Joel being in this movie or the opening scene, there'd essentially be no plot of the second movie with Sky Riley, so his role in this opening scene was of great importance. We saw in the trailer for the second movie that the person that we eventually went on to find out was called Lewis had the smiling entity tormenting him, and that's obviously how we knew that Sky got it, as she witnessed him die. But we didn't know how it eventually ended up with Lewis. So having it be so closely connected to the first movie with Joel was a great way for it to unfold and actually allow both movies to feel like they flowed seamlessly into the other. I thought the twist of Lewis being in the corner of the room was a moment that was really well thought out. It was an accidental sighting and it resulted in an innocent person ending up getting punished when originally it was intended for somebody else. It was an approach that took me by surprise. It was intended for a hardened criminal that had done wrong, and through that it could well have ended up being passed around their gang and impacting more bad people, punishing people who Joel thought deserved to be fed on. What the accidental sighting by Lewis showed us was how different Sky Riley's life would have been if Lewis wasn't sitting in that corner on the day that Joel arrived there. It was all by chance, and I loved that unforgiving element in the movie, because it just ties into the fact that the smiling entity really doesn't care and is unforgiving too. The shock ending. The ending of the opening scene was pretty much the icing on the cake of what not only made it one of the most horrifying moments in the entirety of the film, but also in creating the perfect climax and providing another moment that we simply didn't expect to unfold. We saw Joel's character go through a range of different emotions as he wanted to rid himself of the entity. He thought that he did, realized he didn't, then thought he did again, all to then, when on the gates of freedom, end up locked in a room and be facing death in a completely different way. Once we saw him manage to break out of the home, and then even once avoiding all of the bullets that were firing his way, it seemed like he was finally going to have rid himself of danger and go on to live the type of life that he wanted to without the entity tormenting his mind. But sadly, that didn't happen. He ended up being hit by a car that was driving into frame that we didn't see coming, and neither did he. It took me by complete surprise as we were lured into a false sense of security, thinking Joel was going to be free. And with the camera then slowly zooming back, all we saw was the gang member looking away in shock. But as it zoomed back a little more, it then gradually revealed the smile that was painted in the road and the blood of Joel. Body parts were all over the place and blood was oozing out of his body. It was probably the goriest moment in the entirety of the film, and it came in the first 5 minutes. Joel rid himself of the entity, yet he was killed in a brutal fashion. So it also posed the question on if the entity had anything to do with Joel's death. Personally, I don't think it did. Joel had beat it, but the situation that he found himself in just meant that death reached him in a different way. However, I like the thought-provoking element of it. This opening scene kind of reminded me of the opening scene in Longlegs. The opening scene in that movie was probably one of the most memorable moments in the entirety of the film, and it was arguably one of the scariest too. So it's interesting that Smile went down a similar route and it had the same outcome on the viewer. I wonder if that's something that we'll start to see more of in horror movies, because it does clearly work when executed well. The opening scene in this movie was genuinely incredible to watch unfold in real time for the first time. I didn't know what was going to happen, and it made me feel a range of emotions. I didn't know what to expect, and it just threw me into the world of Smile 2 in a way that was extremely unsettling. We were dropped straight in the deep end in a creative way, and I was still thinking about the very beginning of the movie even after reaching the ending. That's how powerful it was. So, there you have it, why Smile 2's opening scene is perfect. If you want to see a breakdown of the entirety of Smile 2, then click on the card in the top corner. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find videos on more of your favourite movies and TV shows broken down. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rated this movie out of 5 stars, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of the opening scene? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.